Here at Queen Street United Methodist Church in downtown Kinston, North Carolina. We welcome you to our Wesley Bible class. Today we're going to be studying Deuteronomy chapter 13, beginning at verse 12 and carrying on through chapter 14. A lot of this is a reiteration of what we've... The thing about the Pentateuch is that it's... if you hear it once, you're going to hear it 3, 4, 5 times. You're going to hear it different ways. The book of Deuteronomy is a little different from the other chapters in the Pentateuch. It's apparently was not composed during the diaspora, during the time when the people were carried off to Babylon. This is something that was probably generated latter days of, I would think maybe, this is just me, I don't have anything to back me up, but it seems like something that would have been composed during the time of David, and then during the time of Josiah, that it was edited, re-amplified, depending on what Josiah wanted to do with his reform. So, just a heads up about that. But this is a book that was ostensibly discovered prior to the Babylonian captivity. Okay, and it's the groundwork for Josiah to rid the country of paganism. All right. If you hear it said about one of the towns that the Lord your God is giving to you to live in, that scoundrels among you, have gone out and led the inhabitants of the town astray, saying, let us go and worship other gods whom you have not known, then you shall inquire and make a thorough investigation. If the charge is established that such an abhorrent thing has been done among you, you shall put the inhabitants of that town to the sword, utterly destroying it and everything in it, even putting its livestock to the sword. All of its spoil you shall gather into its public square, then burn the town and all its spoil with fire, as a whole burnt offering to the Lord your God. It shall remain a perpetual ruin, never to be rebuilt. Do not let anything devoted to destruction stick in your hand, so that the Lord may turn from his fierce anger and show you compassion, and in his compassion multiply you as he swore to your ancestors, if you obey the voice of the Lord your God by keeping all his commandments that I am commanding you today, doing what is right in the sight of the Lord your God. Well, wow. Dang.
Bloodbath.
I mean, really?
That's pretty bad.
Well, it is pretty bad. Yeah, it's pretty bad, and it's not necessarily something that, I mean, I call for a lot of reform in society, okay, but that's not the way we should go about it. I think we just went about it the right way with a vote, okay. And this is a point that I made before that I want to reiterate. Listen to the wording in this instruction. You should put all the inhabitants of that town to the sword, utterly destroying it and everything in it, even putting the livestock to the sword. All of its spoil you shall gather into the public square, then burn the town and all its spoil with fire, as a whole burnt offering to the Lord your God. It shall remain a perpetual ruin, never to be rebuilt, as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. Okay? When things, over and over again, you read this in the Pentateuch, when a people are in rebellion against God, or if they are the object of God's destruction, when you go out and destroy them, they are what's called dedicated to the Lord. Okay? All the spoil is dedicated to the Lord, which means that their destruction constitute an offering to God. Okay? So when somebody tells you from Judaism that God never sanctioned a human sacrifice, specifically, legally, in the Pentateuch, that is not true. When people are sacrificed for these purposes, they are considered an offering, and that offering serves as a protection of the people so that they don't incur the wrath of God for not having done it. Okay? So when they tell you that the Bible doesn't sanction human sacrifice, and they go back to Abraham, sacrificing Isaac, or almost sacrificing Isaac, that's a confirmation that you don't do a human sacrifice. On the other hand, there is this context. And these people are destroyed in order to preserve the wider community, that God's wrath isn't visited on them. And you'll see over and over again in the Pentateuch that when people fail to do that, that God's favor departs from them. When did Saul lose the favor of God? When was the definitive statement that Saul was not, his kingdom was no longer sanctioned by God?
Was it when he went after David?
No. No. I'll give you a hint. Samuel told him. Saul was supposed to, I think it was the Amorites. He was supposed to attack the Amorites and utterly destroy them. Okay? And he preserved their king and kept some of their livestock. Okay? Then Samuel showed up late, undermining him because he had to make a decision. What are we going to do with all these things? Okay? And you got guys under arms, huh?
Offer them as a sacrifice.
They were dedicated to God, which meant that they were dedicated to destruction.
He did something that Samuel was supposed to do, but Samuel wasn't there. I'm trying to remember.
Samuel was supposed to be there before the battle to give him guidance. Okay? And Samuel did not show up until after the battle. And he found that Saul had not utterly destroyed everything that he attacked. And so Samuel called for the destruction of all the livestock, and he personally killed the king that Saul had let live. Okay, this is rough stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, this is rough stuff.
Yeah.
So understand that it's not out of the realm in the Old Testament that that in Judaism there is a provision for human sacrifice, because that's what this is. These people are being sacrificed so that they don't contaminate the rest of the community. Okay, and it's God Himself giving the order for their destruction. Now, do we today, looking back on this in history, do we concur that this was probably an edict of God?
No. Yes.
Under
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yes.
How else can you justify it if you don't say that it was an edict of God?
well, the question I have is, can we justify it?
Can
No.
we?
Yeah.
I don't see how.
We don't think we can.
Okay.
We have to trust God. That's all I know. We
Okay.
know.
Yeah.
This is done in the context of a nation, like 4,000 years ago. Okay, the rules of engagement have changed. There's no Geneva Convention on this. Okay, this is how people acted, and the question is, should we as a society continue practices like this?
But wasn't God doing this to preserve the people that He had chosen?
This was a technique.
And those people that He had chosen were being led astray
Yes.
because they had the will to. They did it.
Okay.
So He's taken the temptation away from them.
Okay. We today live in a whole environment of temptation.
Right, but it's different in my view, because at this point, this nation that God has chosen to be his people are disobedient.
Well, an element of them, he's proposing what to do in the event that a community within the communities is disobedient.
The element of his community is being disobedient.
Yes. This is not a formula for what to do to the Gentiles, which quite frankly is the same thing.
But we live on this side of the cross, and it's so hard for us to wrap our hands around it.
And it should be. Okay? That's the very point. That's the very point. That actually has something to do with election reading for today. So, we'll see. There's a demarcation, okay, and it comes out in the trial of Christ. So we today, as followers of Christ, are required specifically not to act in this way. Okay?
We're in a much more civil society.
Well, they would not agree with you. They would not agree with you. They would think that this is a very uncivil society.
Who wouldn't?
The people back then.
Oh.
They would say that we tolerate so much, so many things in our society that are negative to a good community. We are altogether too tolerant. I mean, as far as they're concerned, a civil society keeps women in their place. In their, I'm not saying what place that is.
You gotta give her $5 if you do.
I've got one in my place, so,
That's the other thing, $5 I mention my children and my wife.
Well, I would hope that we have progressed since then.
Yes.
I mean,
Not
because
regressed, yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
we consider ourselves more civil than that society.
Yeah.
Okay, they, on the other hand, would look at us from 4,000 years ago and, how do you, aren't your kids vulnerable to the influences of these TikTokers and whatever? And you just let it happen?
Every generation does that. Every generation looks at, like we look at our people now,
Yeah.
older, and think, my mom and daddy would have never let us do that.
Amen.
But there were things that you did anyway. I mean, we did anyway,
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, speak for
What town do you live in?
Come to get Tammy now.
It's just every,
But as I understand it, the Jewish people didn't try to spread their knowledge of God to others.
That's
I know
correct.
Rahab converted or
They
she believed in
actually
God.
they did. They did. It was incumbent upon them to share their law with the resident aliens. Okay, but they were not doing it so that resident aliens could convert to Judaism. They were not
Trying to
interested.
win people
They had a provision for people to convert to Judaism, but that was not their objective.
But they became complacent in their life.
They did, and what they did was they brought elements of the surrounding cultures into their own that contaminated their understanding of who God is and who to worship.
So God never punishes those people that are, his people that are worshiping idols. He punishes the people who led them to sin.
No, he's not only is he punishing the ones who led them to sin, because that's the first part of chapter 13. He's also punishing the people who went along with it. You could not be apostate. You could not be an apostate Jew and survive.
Okay. I just want you to explain it to me. I'm not there yet. Okay, so everything that I've read is that God says, go and destroy these people.
Yeah.
You know, they're worshiping idols.
Yep.
You're not worshiping, you're not supposed to do that.
Right.
You are, so go in and kill them all.
Yes.
But I don't read where it says, and then come back to your neighborhood and kill all those people that were worshiping those idols that they were worshiping.
Well, that's what it says right there.
Which verse?
That whole paragraph after chapter 12 to the end.
And it says to kill your own people?
Yeah. Every one, every man, woman, and child.
See, I
And
thought
all
we
their
was
pets.
I thought we were talking about the,
No, these are Jews who are apostate.
There weren't many left then, were there?
You would think there wouldn't be a country.
And then one of the 12 tribes should be gone.
So, but this mindset, by the way, does not exist within Judaism today, despite what the ICC thinks about Netanyahu. Okay? The Jews are doing everything they possibly can to prevent a genocide in Gaza and in Lebanon. They are not out to kill the general population. They bring all kinds of food in. If you want to see who's trying to kill the general population, it's Hamas that steals the food and then sells it to the people. That's who it's up to. The people who hide behind civilians and make it very hard to discriminate between who's on what side. So. You know, and I know that, I'm getting a comment here that it exists in Zionism. It does not. It does not. Zionism was never intended to expel anybody from Israel. The Arab population that became the Palestinian refugees left because of the war and because they were told to leave by their own people. But Israel did not expel them per se during the early wars in the establishment of Israel. Okay? And many Arabs did stay, and many Arabs are living more freely in Israel than they are in the West Bank or they ever did in Gaza. So Zionism has been widely misrepresented throughout the world. Okay, it just means that there is a state of Israel, it's a Jewish state, but that doesn't mean that other people can't live there. Christians live there. I mean, there isn't anything about Zionism expelling Christians. So, you know, it's a multi-ethnic, multi-religious state. Okay? But it's based on the principles of Judaism. So it's, you know, it's widely misrepresented. And guess who did that? Henry Ford.
Wow.
Henry Ford put together a totally fictitious narrative about Zionism that was picked up by Adolf Hitler and the Arab states and promoted. But it had, you know, it's something of the Elders of Zion is a document, goes way back, and, you know, it was something that was done by Henry Ford, who was a tremendous anti-Semite, and picked up as an excuse to persecute Jews and to resist the establishment of Israel. So, but no, Judaism has progressed to the point where they do not believe in this kind of genocide. If you look on the other side, though, if you look on what the pronouncements have been by Hamas, by Hezbollah, by Iran, they do believe in genocide. And not just of Israel, they believe in genocide of the United States as well. So, that's what I think. But this is, you know, these kinds of practices were done under Josiah's reform. And Josiah was hailed as someone who is bringing people back into the practice of Judaism and the worship of God. So the technique
Are we
was,
talking about a lot of people that they asked to kill, or just a few people?
they're talking about a whole town, a settlement of some sort
Within their community?
within their community, and never to be rebuilt. They were, though. Okay? I mean, a good place to have a town is a good place to have a town. So there's going to be a town.
I wonder how they got the people I mean, if somebody told me to come and throw a stone at somebody or kill them,
Yeah.
I think that's asking a lot of the innocent person.
Truly it is.
I mean, I don't understand how you can really make somebody do that.
Hey, listen, in modern history, you look at not just Hitler, look what Stalin did, look what Mao Zedong did, and look at what Pol Pot did. I mean, these are things in my lifetime where we've seen this kind of behavior over and over again.
Because they've been brainwashed.
Yes, and that's how you convince somebody to do this kind of thing.
So is King Josiah doing that?
Yeah, he is.
He is?
Mm-hmm.
Even though he's known as a good king?
That's what made him a good king in their eyes.
Mobs, you know how they get,
Yeah, it's mob,
Just
you know,
like
mob
when Jesus
mentality
was
when you say
crucified,
mob.
yeah.
Just
We
the
have had-
people that praised him when he came in, how,
That's
you know,
right.
Hosanna.
We have had people within the last several months getting out into the streets and chanting from the river to the sea, which means the annihilation of the Jews between the Jordan and the Mediterranean. Okay? They're not talking about flipping a government. They're talking about annihilating every Jew that exists from the river to the sea. And that's in our streets within the last couple of months. So I'm telling you that this mindset still exists.
And it always will.
As long as there are people around, we have to be very careful. And that's one of the reasons why it's important for us as a society to always have the ability to present an alternative point of view. That's why the First Amendment is so important in our country, so that when somebody comes up with an idea like this, it isn't the only idea that gets presented. That other people in society can say, no, I don't think that's right. That might have been okay 4,000 years ago, but that ain't right today. And push the point. Okay? So anytime you see, whether it's for your side or for somebody else's side, once you start seeing an element of censorship coming in, it has to be resisted for the sake of our society and for the ability of our society to grow and improve. Without that First Amendment right in our Constitution, nobody could have ever challenged slavery. Nobody could have ever challenged the destruction of Native Americans, and nobody could ever challenge. These things needed to be challenged. Okay, we could not have. There was a huge divide over the first Mexican-American War. And one side prevailed, and to be honest with you, the U.S. military was not in favor of the Mexican War. Okay, they prosecuted it because they're military, but they weren't in favor of it. And by and large, I mean, if you read what some of the generals had to say about it, it was a bad idea. But somebody had to have an alternative point of view. And we always have to have that if our society is going to improve. What they're saying is, if you have an alternative point of view, you should be dead. The end of the dialectic, as we said last week.
I guess that would compare to the immigration issue
There are a lot of things on both sides that need to be
that we're
talked about.
having today.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff on both sides. I mean, how humane are you supposed to be? with people who cross illegally? What should their status be once they get here? Who is benefiting our society and who is not? And if there are people who are benefiting our society, would there be a better way to get them into the labor force than for them to cross over arbitrarily without being vetted? You know, can this be managed, and can it be managed humanely? And though, you know, those are all topics, and we need to hear on both sides what people are saying. You know, we as a church, I mean, we can't, as much as we might be opposed to this widespread invasion of our country, we as a church, still can't treat people badly. You know, we have to be able to look out for somebody's welfare and whatever when that opportunity presents itself, when that need presents itself. At the same time, that doesn't mean you endorse that the person is here illegally or that they shouldn't be deported. But you don't go just throwing them out and starving them to death or, you know, something like that. We still have to be a humane society. So there's a balance here that has to be struck. And this conversation has to be had in the media, and it has to be had in the halls of Congress and within administrations and amongst the judiciary. And we do have a system that can hear both sides. Once we lose that, I mean, it's not only going to be bad for the people who are crossing over, it's going to be bad for U.S. citizens as well. So that's, you know, but there was no freedom of speech, there's no First Amendment in this society, there's no consideration for a dialogue of any sort. Just having the dialogue is a capital offense. So we need to be aware of these kinds of divisions and how we handle them today as opposed to how they handled them back then. But we can't go back to the Bible and say, well, I'm going to shut you down because that's what the Bible says and I know that I'm on God's side. Watch out. You start hearing that stuff, watch out. Okay? Well, let's see. We're getting close to the end. I don't want to pick up 14 until we can really discuss it, but pay attention because there is a sea change. There's a complete change of mind. There is an opportunity for humanity to advance with the understanding that Christ brought to the law. The understanding that Christ brought to a people who had a closed society. Okay? So we look at it quite differently and should. And, how do you know which way to go? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in church. So,
To be continued.
to be continued. Tune into our service and see if I can cover this better. I'll talk to you later. God bless you all. Thanks for being with us.
Like how the power comes on.